Welcome to the MarTech Podcast, and I Hear Everything production. In this podcast, you'll hear the stories of world-class marketers that use technology to drive business results and achieve career success. Here's the host of the MarTech Podcast, Benjamin Shapiro.
Welcome to the MarTech Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Shapiro, and thank you for joining us live. Today we're publishing on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, I guess we're calling it X now, all of the places. And we've got a great topic for you today, something that's near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about video creation, something that we're focusing more here on the MarTech Podcast and with my company, I Hear Everything. We're going to be talking about what audiences want from creators and some tips for creating engaging videos. And joining us today is Matt Pierce from Techsmith. Matt, welcome to the MarTech Podcast. Very excited to have you here.
Benjamin, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I am so thrilled. And honestly, as I mentioned offline, this is my first time running the show here. We're using Ecamm Live to produce our new live streams. We're turning them into videos, getting ready to move beyond audio only podcasts into this multimodal format where we're on Instagram and we're on YouTube. And boy, is this a timely conversation. Let's start off at the top. I want to do a little bit that we call the elevator pitch. Let's see, I've got a graphic for this. Elevator pitch. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your company so everybody knows where you're coming from?
Yeah, so Techsmith is a 35-plus-year-old software company, and we've been in the business for a long time making tools like Snagit and Camtasia that are great for capturing, editing, doing things that are with content that's on your screen. So Camtasia happens to be a very full video editor that allows you to capture and record your screen and make, really great looking videos. You can take videos like this and edit it. In fact, for my video podcast, I take my stuff out of Ecamm and right into Camtasia for editing. And as for myself, I'm a growth and content marketing manager for Techsmith. I've also been in the learning and development field, spent the last 18 years of my career at Techsmith helping people to learn how to make better videos for learning, instruction, and for informational purposes. So it's been a great time, and so grateful that we get to talk about video today because it's something that I love to talk about.
It's one of the things that we've been really focusing on, and the world has changed where I started podcasting 7 years ago, building this show, the MarTech Podcast, and all of a sudden I looked up and podcasts are wonderful. They're great for content consumption, but it seems like the world wants more. They want to be able to engage with their creators. There's still a place in the world for audio-only podcasts. But I want to get into something that you at Techsmith have done, which is ask a lot of your viewers what they are expecting from creators. So let's start off with a segment we like to call What's the Word? I want you to give us one word that summarizes what you think creator audiences want from creators.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's hard to get to one word, but I think if I have to pick one word, I'm going to say fit. And let me explain. Audiences want videos that fit with their needs or their wants, right? And they don't want to be led down this path of thinking it's going to be good. It's going to be the thing that they need. And then be like, oh, this doesn't match it. That's like the number one reason people stop watching video is it didn't fit. The title didn't match, the description didn't match, and they get into it and they're like, now I've just spent this time on this thing and it doesn't fit my needs. So that's why I chose the word fit, because I think that's what most audience members want from whatever your video is. And that could be from across the spectrum, whether you're trying to teach them about a product or explain the value benefit of something, or, just entertain them. People want to know it's going to match with what they're looking for.
So double back a little bit and tell me about how you conduct the study to get the finding that fit is the most important. Who did you talk to? What were some of the questions that you asked? Let's go into a little bit more detail about the study.
Yeah, so this was 1,000 different participants in the study. They're not necessarily our customers that we were trying to, not just talk to our customer base, but and particularly these are people who are in industry. They might be working in healthcare, they might be working in finance, they might be working in technology. And the one thing I like to point out with a study like this is we're not like a research institution at a university. We're not talking to college students. These are typically business professionals who we found through we use Qualtrics to help perform the survey. They went out and did the things that they do and brought them in. And so there's a lot of different questions. And this is actually a study that we've been running. This is our 5th time running it. So 2013, 2016, 2018, 2021, and now again this year. And so some of these are almost like longitudinal questions at this point, because we've been watching the trends for a decade now and looking to see what happens. And some of those questions, and it just kind of varies. But what's their preference for watching video? How often are they watching video? When they watched an instructional or informational video, so we eliminated entertainment out of this as well. So I think that's important to note. We're not looking at like Netflix habits of watching, the binge watching series. We are asking specifically about instructional and informational videos so that we could key in on those kind of focus areas, because entertainment habits are very different. And so we did ask people like, hey, why did you start watching that video? And I think that's where the question that gets to my answer about fit. We asked them about preferences of length, like how long are you typically watching a video, or do you like to watch video? And there's some interesting data there that is maybe contrary to kind of popular belief. We also have a section where this year, obviously, if you're not talking or thinking about the role AI is playing, it's kind of like, when are you going to be left behind? And we did ask some questions about the impact of AI on video in terms of how they feel about videos that are created with AI, how they feel about having a person that's not an actual human, but an avatar on screen.
So if fit is the main word, right? Your what's the word answer for what creators are looking for, there has to be some consistency. Talk to me a little bit about what makes a fit, and how do you match what a consumer is looking for? How do you understand how to find a fit with their searches?
Well, I think from a marketing perspective, it's a lot of the other things that we're already doing when we start thinking about like an SEO strategy with keywords, right? We're out on, whether it's on Google or YouTube or wherever we might be, and we're starting to say, hey, where do I have relevance? Where can I be an expert at? And then what are the things that we can tactically create that are going to allow us to show up in a feed? Because whether you're on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, it doesn't really matter. You need to be doing the things that are going to allow your audience, the ones that you're trying to talk to find you. And then what you're going to do is break down those into topics of like, hey, how do I get a little bit more narrow on a particular topic, right? You think about even your podcast here as a video podcast, you're thinking about, this kind of omni-channel strategies. And so then you're breaking that down into these smaller pieces, and you're starting to look at the personas that are interested in that. You're starting to look at what kind of things are they looking at on a day-to-day basis, or what kind of things are they searching for? And then you apply that to your video. Now, when it comes to things about actually getting them to see that, a couple key things. Your title and description are essential, right? The title should match what you're talking about. The description needs to give that body of information. So not only the whatever algorithm search engine's going to look at that, but the person who's actually going to view it looks at that and says, yeah, that's what I want. That matches my need. That's a fit for me. And so then there's some other things about, I think just thumbnails and stuff like that you can do as well.
I've been thinking a lot about video production. As I mentioned, we're making this migration. We're live streaming now. It's more challenging to try to figure out not only what do your users want, what do your audience want, but also doing that sort of back end research. I want to move on to a segment that we like to call secret sauce. So if you're creating a new media property, right? You're building a new media brand, and you're thinking about there's a certain recipe here. What are my components to be able to not only understand who my ICP is, but to be able to do the research to answer the questions that they have? What's the secret sauce in the recipe you're cooking up?
Yeah, great question. I think for video in particular, because that's, again, kind of where I focus on, I think one thing you have to really do is go out and see what is being talked about, what is being created, go look at what's available already and see, does the message that you have or that you want to convey, maybe that's a product message, maybe that's kind of, if you want to be a creator that's specifically focused on just your creating content and building your brand that way, I think you need to understand what's out there and what is being looked at. That's number one, because if you don't understand the landscape from that perspective, it doesn't matter what else you do, because you might you're either going to have to compete with people who are very successful there, or you're going to be trying to fill in gaps that don't really exist and that no one's looking for. So I think that's number one. And then two, I think there's an importance here of that understanding what your audience is also looking for from a stylistic standpoint. One of the things I've noticed over the last year really is that there's been this trend in content. Like we talk about making great looking videos all the time, and we want videos to look good. We want high quality production. But the reality is
Don't
what's
we
working
all?
really well, right? What was that?
Don't we all?
Yeah, right. We want that. But what's interesting when you look at what's working really well in a lot of instances is this user generated content style, or we call it UGC, right? And it's interesting. We love screen capture at my company. We love using our screen recorders. That's technology that we have. Of course, we're going to use it. But it's like people, what they'll do now is they'll take out, because they want it to be authentic, they'll pull out their phone, they'll record their screen. It looks not very good, but people react to that. And it's you got to understand your demographic, right? What are people going to react to? And then I think the third piece, if I can get it in there, is experiment. Video, like everything else, you can't just set up your studio and say like, I'm good to go. You got to play with content. You got to play with format. You got to play with length. What kind of interactions are you creating? What's the engagement points? Stylistically, who's on camera even can matter. And so I think just keeping experimenting, keep trying and see what connects with your audience. And when you find something, put that in your playlist, keep doing it, but then keep going. You can't stop and say like, we're good. And I've done that. Like I've gotten to the point where there's things I've done, like, I'm just going to keep doing this. And we watch over time. We're like, oh gosh, it's not performing as well as it did,
As a
2 years
marketer,
ago.
I think about the different types of content, right? We're moving towards a multimodal world where the expectation from your audience is that they can find you in the right format, in the right channel, whenever, wherever they want, which from a creator perspective is incredibly challenging, right?
Yep.
I honestly don't really know how to master the YouTube algorithm. Really good at podcasts. We're figuring out YouTube as we go. We've got a LinkedIn audience. People tend to resonate with our content over there, but it's a different format. You have to write your text post. It doesn't seem like anybody has mastered the type of sort of algorithmic outreach for creators like we've done with SEO. So are there tools that you use or you rely on to try to extract or mine data from a specific audience that you feel like are applicable across all of the different channels? Or do you really have to experiment what works on LinkedIn, what works on YouTube? How do you shoehorn basically what you're capturing to make it the right mix for the right channel?
Yeah, I wish there was a panacea, right, of one thing that's going to solve all of this. And there's not. Like, for instance, I'm looking at SEO data in SEMrush. For analytics, I'm using like Sprout Social because we're using it to post, we're using it to get analytics. But honestly, I was doing some share out for our company just yesterday, and to get some of that data, I just was like, I was in the YouTube platform looking at data. I was in Instagram. I was in TikTok because like I needed to make sure it was accurate and efficient. And there was no good way to just do that for everything that was like, this works perfectly. I think like Sprout Social got us closer, but it wasn't everything that I needed or wanted. So I do think there's just a measure of like, you're going to have to be in these platforms. You're going to have to explore them. I think there's relationships and similarities across all of them though. Like good content is good content is good content. Popular ideas, they're going to be good pretty much everywhere. But I think that the reality is you're right. Like LinkedIn, you have to do different media creation than you necessarily have to do for like X or whatever. So I think it's going to be playing that, but I do think there are tools that can help us to get a little bit closer, and you can repurpose. Like you can say like, hey, this video played well over on YouTube Shorts. Let's try it on LinkedIn. But your audience, you have to make sure, are those the same audiences or are they different? Like we find that our audience on YouTube, very different than on LinkedIn.
Tell me a little bit more about that. What makes you think that the audience is different in one channel versus the other? Are you looking at demographics? Is it content? Give me the secret sauce.
Well, I think it's been content performance up to this point. Like the things that like we've been experimenting with more like we'll call them meme type formats for some of our videos on Shorts, right? Like YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and Instagram. So these are things that are kind of when someone's maybe not product aware, they're not even problem aware. We're kind of hitting like you have generally this problem. You have too many meetings in your life. Right. So we're playing off of that idea. We all have too many meetings. We know that meetings kind of stink. And
Yep.
so the idea being we're trying to drive that down. Those play just so much better kind of in those popular YouTube Shorts, TikTok kind of style videos on those platforms than it does on LinkedIn. I find like on LinkedIn for the content that we're seeing and I'm publishing personally is having a strong opinion, taking a stance, even if others are going to disagree with it, get them engaging. And often still, I'm not seeing a lot of play in video. I know they're working on, they're doing more in that space, but so just from kind of the last year of content performance, I'd say those audience look different. I have a healthy skepticism of the demographic data from the platforms, particularly when I look at YouTube. But they do seem to be slightly different, particularly in TikTok. And I don't believe that, TikTok is just for, Gen X or Gen Z and millennials. I think you've got a whole wide audience there. But I
Normalize
think
TikTok for old people. Let's do it,
that's
everyone. We
right.
can all just let the algorithm seep into our brain. I want to ask a follow-up question here, though. You're saying that the meme stuff performs better in one channel versus the other, but is that the audience likes to consume memes on X and they're looking for professional content on LinkedIn, so you can't be as jovial on in your format? Is it a format or is it an audience and content question?
I think as an audience, for me, I think it's more audience and content. I think people like to have fun on LinkedIn. Like, look, I think people like good stories on LinkedIn. I think people like to hear good things. But I think their purpose for being there is typically different, right? Like, I think when someone finds us in their YouTube Shorts, and let's be clear, most of it is, our main YouTube channel is over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. But we're seeing most of the views lately come through non-subscribers. The role of the subscriber on YouTube has just kind of disappeared. So we're seeing that but they're in that mode, right? Like I'm looking for something to catch my interest that is a fit for who I am, what I'm about, what I'm thinking about, what's in my head, what I want to do. And with LinkedIn, you're not maybe searching for as much fit. It's just kind of what has the algorithm served to you, and you might be reading a few posts, you're kind of going on. Maybe you're looking for a job, who knows? But I think it's an audience differentiation because of the way the platforms are serving up that content. And I think it's just also, I think ultimately in LinkedIn, again, just those folks are going to be looking for things that are maybe slightly a little bit more professional. Whereas when you're on YouTube, you might be doing it because you're on a break. Although if we look at YouTube, just as generally, it's the second largest search engine. I think everyone probably knows that at this point. It's a huge how-to engine. And my guess is we're going to see a continued increase in particularly YouTube and TikTok and Instagram to some degree, that it's going to be a how-to platform. People are going there just to look for information. We actually see that in our study as well, that, a lot of people that said, hey, the last instructional informational video I watched was on YouTube or a platform like it.
Here's my big takeaway. The word is fit. When you're thinking about how to match what your audience wants, is you have to not only understand the audience, find your fit with the topics, and you have to triangulate that, whether you're using SEO, whether you're using social as a signal. You also need to be able to find the right fit for the medium. Something that works on LinkedIn probably needs to have a more professional tone. When you're putting something on Instagram or TikTok, you need to be more attention grabbing. When you're asking somebody to scroll through Instagram, it's all about the imagery. You not only need to find the right fit in terms of the content you're producing, whether it's long form that you're breaking down, or whether you're just creating short form content by yourself, you also need to understand the platforms. I think that means that the big takeaway here is you have to be very selective with what platforms you're going to focus on, or you need some help getting your content repurposed to go into the right place. I want to move on to our second topic today, which is tips for creating engaging videos, something that I am deeply interested in. knowing that we're on Ecamm Live. We're doing our live streams for the first time. Hopefully this has been engaging. Matt, let's bring it back here. I worry that, so many bells and whistles, so much stuff is moving, or are we not moving fast enough and we need more stuff floating to keep everybody's attention? Help me figure this out. We already did secret sauce. Let me find another gimmick. Let's do, are you... Toss up. I love our segments here, Matt. Let's do a toss up. What do you think is more important? Do you think that you should be focusing on video production by using long form content and repurposing, or should you be just creating your short form content up front?
Great question. And I hate to answer with it depends, but I think it depends on your resources and what your messages are. I think either way can work. I think, but what you have to decide is, one, like you said, where are the platforms? Which ones are you what is your priority? Because they can't all be your priority. So which ones are you going to prioritize, and then go from there. So if YouTube as a platform is your priority, start with a long form kind of 16:9 horizontal content, repurpose it into vertical. But if you're saying my audience is really on TikTok and I want to be on TikTok, then you're going to, look, your production quality is going to drop a little bit. You're going to get out your mobile phone. You're going to do some vertical videos. And you're going to go over there and then figure out okay, I can take that to YouTube Shorts. I can take that to Instagram and so forth. So I think it really depends, but I think either's fine. So it's not much of a toss up, but you've got to make a decision or you've got to hire help.
Look, are you an in-house marketer or a consultant? Because it depends is a classic consulting answer. Matt, I'm going to press you here. Obviously, it depends, but there's a couple different things that
I would say if I'm pushed on the topic, right? Yeah. Right now, what we're doing is focused on much more on the short form vertical content because we can do it faster, we can get it out quicker, and we can reach more of the audiences because platforms are supporting that. Whereas like YouTube videos have a certain style. And you can put those other places, but YouTube videos kind of feel like a YouTube video, and people notice that. I won't bust your chops too much,
but you said it depends, and here's the thing that I think it depends on. It depends on your type of business. It depends on whether you are trying to reach a B2B versus a B2C audience. In my opinion, if you are focusing on B2C, then your channel mix is going to be different. Now you're looking more at Instagram, TikTok, maybe you're getting into X as your social media distribution. Yes, YouTube, but there's also a bunch of YouTube shorts. But I think that you're probably thinking about social media as your engagement channel. And then that's one mix. I'm leaning social shorts. If I'm thinking about B2B content, I'm probably saying I really need to be in LinkedIn first and foremost. Then we're looking at YouTube and X. I'm going horizontal, hopefully doing live streams. That's really, to me, what it depends on. What type of business are you running?
I think my only pushback to that is that while I think you could make the distinction for B2C to B2B, I think the reality is a lot of B2B folks that are going to see content are in those other platforms as well. So that's about a little bit about that fit, right? Like who are you trying to talk to and can you find them? It's definitely a lot harder from a B2B standpoint, but if you're trying to sell to like a manager of an IT department to get buy-in for your product, or maybe you're trying to get to that the VP of marketing, I can tell you my VP of marketing, she's on TikTok. She can tell you about the trend. It's very demure. That's the thing right now, right? And so if she sees something though, she has brought stuff to us that said, "Hey, I saw this. Could you go check this out?" So there's a play there, but you have to be very strategic about that, and knowing that that's a lot harder than to say just going to LinkedIn and saying like, "Hey, these folks are focused on business or focused on learning kind of the tools of the trade here. Let's just go there."
I feel like the B2C content is always bleeding edge and it trickles down to B2B, right? And all of a sudden you're seeing more personal content, more memes, more high fidelity video dripping down to things like LinkedIn. But that wasn't always the case. LinkedIn was mostly just text posts until relatively recently.
Yep. And it's still growing, right? Like that's there's a lot of opportunity there. So if you're looking to get into LinkedIn and video, this is actually a great time because a lot of open space there.
So when we think about creating engagement in videos, right? There's obviously the content. You're obviously thinking about your channels. Talk to me about the way that we're producing content. We've gone from user-generated content, just grab your phone and snap something and publish it, into, now the world seems to be going a little higher fidelity, multimodal. It's definitely the trend that we're going, trying to produce, higher quality, better videos, something that's more compelling. What's the right way to do video capture that actually creates more engagement?
So I think if we're talking about video capture in and of itself, one thing that we've noticed, and I'll just pull from the study here for just a second, is like over time, there's two things that matter about video capture, and we'll put them together because I think they're key components of the whole thing. Is one, audio quality is king. It has been in the last 4 times we've done this study. Audio has to be clear. It has to sound good. You can't have lots of background noise because that will kill any video anytime.
I'm going to get closer to my mic now that we're talking about it.
That's a good idea. So audio is number one. From a video capture, like the reality is that we've got such powerful devices. Don't go out and buy a bunch of camera gear to start off. There's learn some techniques, some basic techniques. One of the things I see a lot of times, and I see this a lot with people taking pictures too, is they're like, hey, could you take a picture for us? And what is the first thing they do? They pick up the phone, they're going to take the picture, and they step back. For whatever reason, we think we have to get close, learn to get close. People like faces. People like to feel like they're engaged with whomever is talking. And that's a very simple thing. And there's a lot of other techniques that you could apply. But I think from a $0 quick to apply, just lean in a little bit. I actually had a guest on my podcast he's a video producer, created an ad for the Super Bowl. And when he came on the podcast, similar to what we're doing now, he was super close in his camera, basically his face filled the entire frame. And I'm like, is that how you want it? He's like, absolutely. He's like, people engage better when your face, with your face. And so I think there's simple things like that we can do. And there's a whole bunch of other things that come along with video production we could talk about that I think help with engagement. There is no, again, kind of one panacea, one thing that you should do. It's going to, really depend on what you're trying to do, the style of the video, but you want to create a library basically that you can pull the parts and pieces that you need as you need them. So you can put them together to make a great, compelling, interesting, relevant piece of content.
I've been leaning forward. I've got my mic closer to my mouth. I'm trying to get as much face to the camera as I possibly can. I appreciate the advice. I also think that there's the question about motion and graphics. And, if you're doing a good job with your video capture, it doesn't have to be a ton. I just went through a whole round. I wrote a big LinkedIn post about how I rebuilt my home studio. My webcam is now my alter ego. But I've got a new camera. It's great, but it's not world changing. A lot of it is just getting everything set up the right way. But when you have good, high quality capture, you need to be able to have something that is engaging. How do you keep people's attention when you're creating video and not just have one face talking the entire time?
Yep. So I think the live stream here is a great example, right? You're making some changes. You're switching up. You're being seen. I'm being seen. We're seeing some different kind of setups. You're bringing in graphics. All that can help, right? If you look at professional television, like a TV show, and this is something everyone can try. It will ruin the show for you, but it's worth doing. Pick your favorite show and just count between the changes. So if you start at the very beginning, every time it changes, the screen changes, the scene changes, something about it really changes, start counting again. So let's say it'd be 1, 2, 3, scene changes, then you go back to 1. What you'll find is that time and movement is it's 1 second, 1.5 seconds at most. Now, there are very artsy filmmakers who will do long pushes or something like that. But even then, they're usually following something along a hallway or down through whatever situation. So you want to keep things changing. So it could be that you've got 2 cameras. So maybe you're cutting in and out. If all you've got is one camera, and particularly let's say you're using a phone, you set your phone to 4K recording, which takes a little bit of space. So make sure you got the space. And then when you're editing, do the simple trick where basically you're maybe waist up to top of head And then to cut in and out, you're just kind of pushing in so a little bit closer, then it's back. And you can do that at cuts where you're trying to cover up a mistake. And it makes that, again, it's just a simple change that makes everything look a little bit better. It also helps if you don't like the look of jump cuts. But here's the thing, YouTube creators are using jump cuts, which basically means you got two clips together. It looks like the person kind of like moved rapidly. Those jump cuts, it's motion, it's engagement. People are looking for things that move. We're just wired that way. And that's one thing that will help.
How do you feel about After Effects and graphics? It's one of the things we've got. Let's see. Press that button. It's not going to work. Watch this. Hey, this sort of. No, I'm way off. I can do this. Here you go. After Effects. Hey, look, all the YouTube stuff. Subscribe. Link. Wonderful. How much stuff should be popping up to keep information present, and how much should you just be working on scene changes?
So it depends on your goal, because if you're talking about like a learning video, like you're trying to teach somebody a how-to or something like that, it's very different than if it's like an informational kind of commercial. If it's you're more about, I want to get you information, I want to get you learning something, you want to actually kind of limit some of that, because you get this, what's called cognitive load, this heavy weight on people's brain when they're trying to read, watch, and listen. They can listen and they can watch, and they can do that pretty well, multi-streaming. But once you add that reading component in, they're like, oh my gosh, what I got to figure out what this is. It gets to be heavy. Or if there's lots of things you're following around and you're plus watching a person, it just gets cognitively heavy. So you want to be careful there. Now, I think with commercials, go watch what, they're putting on networks, on over the air kind of streaming channels. And you can start to see like, how are they using motion? So it can be very effective for drawing attention. But ultimately, I think you want to make sure there's one focus. Don't make me try to focus in multiple places, but you can, your subscribe button there that popped up. Great example. You can pop that up. It's low lift. I see subscribe buttons enough in my life that I don't have to really think hard about what it is. A little animation draws my attention to it, because at that moment, that's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to draw attention to anything else. It was like, hey, don't forget, this is an action I want you to take. So you just want to be thoughtful about it. I think there's lots of place for motion and graphics to be involved. I've noticed the transitions here, like the lower thirds come in for the names. That's great. It's low lift. It doesn't take too much attention away from anything else. But again, you're drawing to a specific focus that, hey, this is Matt Pierce. He's from Techsmith or Ben Shapiro or whatever it might be. And so I think you just want to balance it out. It's the kind of that litmus test of, I can't always explain it, but I know it when I see it. And you'll just watch your video and say like, how would someone feel watching this? Are they overwhelmed, or is this really adding to the things that I'm doing? Another kind of analogy here is that movies, if you watch what's in movies, any prop, any situation, everything has a purpose. So any motion graphic you do should have a purpose, should have value, should be adding to the message, adding to the thing that you want to have happen at the end of that video.
The clip needs to jump around. You need to move. You want to have some sort of visual element every couple of seconds, definitely more than a minute. It's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out. My biggest problem, to be honest with you, is I keep hitting the wrong key, and then all of a sudden I'm in the wrong clip, and now, hey, we're getting used to doing all of this stuff all together at once. I want to move on to what we're going to call the big finish. You've done this wonderful study. You've interviewed 1,000 different subscribers, that 1,000 different, I can't call them subscribers, people that are watching videos to understand what their behaviors are, what their desires are. I'm sure there's more information in your studies. What didn't we cover? Let's go through the big finish.
Yeah. So one of the big things I think that's really interesting to me is length of video and what people ascribe to, why they prefer that length of video. So it's interesting because we've seen this shift over time. And I'm a proponent of like, look, short as possible, long as needed. That's always good advice. But when we start to have to put a number on it, what this year's study says is that a lot of people, for informational and instructional videos, just to be, again, clarifying that this is not entertainment, the majority of the people, so 24% of the people actually said 10 to 19 minutes was their preferred length, which was astounding to me. I'm like, 10 to 19 minutes, that actually seems really long. Now, just to give clarity, 3 to 4 minutes, 16% of the people said that. 5 to 6 minutes was 19% of the people. So it's not like everybody said, I want 10 to 19 minutes. But the length of time that we get is important, because then that gives you room, right? Like you think about a podcast like this, people are going to listen to more than 30 seconds of it. But what's really important is we actually break that down in the report and give like ascribed reasons. People said like, the reason I want this longer video is because I want to dive in to the information. I want to learn a new skill, or I want to learn about, like, people that said they want it really short. They just like, I just want a really quick general topic. Maybe it's a feature. I want to know what that feature does. So
Let
as you're
me
creating,
jump in. I have a question for you
yeah,
related to that, where people generally want, or the most common length of a video, 10 to 19 minutes. Did you find any disparity based on age? Is it a younger generation wants their short form content because, you know, the tagline is they don't have the attention span anymore, or is it just everybody's kind of consistent?
Yeah, I don't know that I have the age data right in front of me, and that's a great question for us to dig into. But I know from past studies, I think across age, it was fairly consistent. Now, remember, we're already talking about an age group that is, they're out of school. These are not college students, so they're a little bit older, but I don't have a specific answer for that. But my guess is it's fairly consistent.
Okay. Any other takeaways from your study?
Yeah, one thing I think is really important, particularly because we've talked about how do you multi-purpose all this stuff, and the role of AI becomes much more apparent, right? Like, how do we use AI to maybe further the things that we're trying to do because we're trying to multi-purpose? You know, there's tools out there that will take a long form video and cut it into clips, like Opus Clips is one of those. And I think one of the key things that we saw here is that 90% of the people in the study said they were open to AI assisted creation, right? Like they wanted to, like, okay, if someone used AI, I'm okay with that. But 75% of them had concerns. And I think those concerns are telling, if you are going to use AI, it's accuracy of content. So that kind of goes back to fit, right? Like people want to know that this is accurate. It fits my needs and the thing I'm trying to do. They want, 24% of the people said quality of content. Right? Is it good quality, or did it just the AI hallucinate something? And then 21% said that they had issues with origins of the content, like where did it come from? So that's where we as marketers and creators get to be really thoughtful about, like, hey, I want this to be mine. I don't want the robot to write it for me. And so you can really source that well. I think that was another key kind of thing, is that there's room here to grow with AI, and AI means a lot of things in video. I mean, everything from script creation to social media creation to cutting up the videos to even doing things like, we don't necessarily think about it as AI, but like background removal. That's a type of AI with machine learning. So there's lots of applications here, and it is worth looking into and using to help you scale.
We are all wondering whether AI is delivering the truth or making up something that it thinks we want to hear. It's fascinating to hear how it's being applied into video creation. Matt, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thanks so much for being my guest. I learned a ton. And honestly, this is something that we're paying a ton of attention to, trying to create more content for the right platforms. I think the word of the day here is fit. You have to understand who your audience is. You have to understand what channel you're publishing to, and your video, whether you're doing the highest quality video in the world for publication everywhere, whether you're just using your iPhone, get close to that camera, have good audio, say the things that you need to say, but honestly, keep it moving. That seems to be the tip of the day. And that wraps up this episode of the Martech Podcast. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Matt Pierce, the Learning and Audio Video Ambassador for Techsmith. If you'd like to get in touch with Matt, we're going to publish a link to his LinkedIn profile on our show notes. If you find the podcast, we'll put it on the comments for anybody that wants to get in touch with Matt. If you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, you can always visit techsmith.com if you want more information about Techsmith. Again, we publish this live, YouTube, Instagram. If you want to see the full video, feel free to share this. We're going to break it down into shorter format videos. We're going to be putting them on YouTube, create some social content out of this as well. If you're interested in creating a media brand like the Martech Podcast and you want to see how the sausage is made, go to iheareverything.com. You can find our contact information. I'll walk you through there as well. Thanks again for joining this episode. And until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.